Hold your breath and stare the truth down. Why do you keep choosing the poison that leaves you emptier each dawn than you were the night before? What if chemistry isn't holding the leash at all, but a nameless hunger for meaning screaming in? The dark of your own depths. Jung knew no one ever gets hooked on a bottle, a screen, or a needle. We get hooked on the illusion that for one fragile heartbeat, the abyss will finally stop hurting. Picture a man staggering through a sun-blasted desert. His tongue is cracked, his canteen bone dry, and he's haunted by one relentless image. A glimmering pool just beyond the next dune. He lunges, he drinks. Hot sand scrapes his throat. That mirage is addiction. It promises water, gives dust, and dares you to chase it again tomorrow. Carl Jung peered straight into that hallucination and named its secret: spiritus contra spiritum, a duel of spirits. The cheap spirit in the bottle, the glowing spirit behind a screen, the synthetic spirit in a pill, all square off against the greater spirit you once felt flickering inside you. They win not because they're powerful, but because they impersonate something sacred you've forgotten how to reach. Think back. The first time the liquid burned your throat, the first electric scroll at 2 a.m., the first needle's freeze. It wasn't the substance that hooked you. It was the tiny explosion of aliveness. For a breath, colors sharpened, noise dimmed, and you tasted a world that finally matched the size of your hunger. You weren't chasing oblivion. You were chasing meaning in disguise. But counterfeits demand tribute. Each return trip costs a little more time, a little more dignity, a little more of the real you. And still, you crawl on bleeding knees because the desert keeps whispering water just one dune farther. Meanwhile, the true wellspring waits buried under your own ribcage, corked by fear, shame, and the lie that wholeness must be earned. Jung's insight slices through the mirage. The bottle isn't your enemy, it's your compass, spinning, cracked, but still aimed at something infinite. The craving is a prayer in a language you haven't decoded yet. Your task is not to shatter the compass in disgust, but to ask what distant country it keeps pointing toward, and why you exiled yourself from that homeland in the first place. Because if thirst is inevitable, you might as well crave real water. And to find it, you'll have to descend past the shiny lobby of your personality into the basement where the shadow paces, still clutching the keys to every locked room you refuse to enter. Imagine your psyche as a grand hotel. You guide guests through the marble lobby, smiling, composed, credentials polished to a shine. But 4 floors beneath, the service elevator groans open onto a corridor you never show anyone. Heavy doors line the hall, each one padlocked with labels like rage, hunger, grief, wild joy. There you've stuffed every impulse that once embarrassed, frightened, or scandalized you. Here's the problem. The shadow hates being caged. Leave it in darkness long enough, and it plans a jailbreak. One night, while your model citizen self sleeps, the lock snaps. Footsteps echo up the stairwell. By morning, the bank app shows 4-figure charges at the casino, or the empty wine bottles clink accusingly in the kitchen sink, or your phone screen is scorched with dawn-colored porn tabs. You stare at the evidence as if a stranger framed you. In truth, that stranger is the incarcerated twin you pretended didn't exist. Jung warned that what you resist not only persists, it grows. The shadow grows by siphoning energy from repression. Every time you swallow anger to keep the peace, it fattens. Every time you fake a laugh to avoid awkward silence, it sharpens its claws. Eventually, the shadow hijacks the wheel during a blind curve, leaving persona dazed in the passenger seat, asking, "How did I get here again?" Why does the shadow crave substances and screens? Because those are silent accomplices. A bottle never judges the confession spilling out between swigs. A scrolling binge won't flinch when you unleash unfiltered envy. For a glorious, destructive hour, the shadow can roar its truth while persona floats in anesthetic fog. Then comes shame, the fresh padlock, until pressure rebuilds and the cycle resets. So how do you disarm a force made of everything you fear? First, stop demonizing it. The shadow is not evil, it is exiled vitality. It holds your creative sparks, your uncensored hunger for life, your capacity to feel without a filter. Facing it is not moral failure, it is homecoming. Sit with a journal at midnight and let the forbidden words crawl onto the page. Allow a solitary scream inside a parked car. Admit you're furious at a parent you forgave too quickly. Each act of honesty flicks on a basement light. Monsters shrink to misunderstood children waiting to be held. Integration does not mean giving the shadow free rein. It means offering it citizenship under new laws, honesty, boundaries, conscious ritual. Rage can lift weights instead of bottles. Grief can weep in trusted arms instead of dissolving in vodka. Wild joy can dance sober under streetlights instead of detonating at 3 a.m. raves. The shadow's energy, once welcomed, becomes fuel instead of sabotage. And here's the hidden treasure. When the shadow no longer needs disguise, cravings lose. They're disguises too. You begin to notice the urge to drink is really the urge to scream. The itch to scroll is really the ache to be seen. Answer the honest need and the counterfeit ritual crumbles. But many never reach this basement confrontation because they're lulled by the brightest myth of all. That brain chemistry alone dictates destiny. The world hands them a neat dopamine diagram and says, "Problem solved, just hack the circuit." They fixate on smoke and ignore the fire, which is exactly why we must now strip away that myth and ask, what if the neuroscience story, powerful as it is only half the map? Because until we see beyond dopamine graphs, the shadow keeps driving, and every mirage on the highway still looks like water. Walk into any slick rehab lecture and you'll see the same PowerPoint slide, a rainbow-lit brain scan, little red dots pulsing where dopamine floods the nucleus accumbens. The presenter clicks forward, and the message is clear. Here's your demon, here's its nest, it's seductive, because if a craving is nothing but a squirting neurotransmitter, then salvation is a pill, a protocol, a toggle switch in grey. Matter. But Jung would lean over that glowing slide and whisper, smoke isn't the blaze. Dopamine is the applause after a beautiful performance, not the violins, not the story, not the longing that dragged the violinist on stage in the first place. Strip away the circumstances that make life worth living, and the applause machine goes haywire, clapping for beer cans, slot machines, tick-tock loops, anything that tricks the brain into thinking the show has begun. Neuroscience gives us priceless tools, meds that steady withdrawal, scans that predict relapse, statistics that prove recovery is possible. Yet those tools become shackles when we forget the soul wielding them. A lab can tell you what lights up. It cannot tell you why your light went out. Think of the brain as a cockpit. The gauges scream, "Pull up, terrain ahead." Science hands you a manual on alarms, voltage, circuitry. Useful, essential even. But if the pilot is asleep at the wheel, if the story that once gave flight meaning has crashed, then perfect gauges only measure the descent. Here's the quiet heresy. Your craving isn't a broken circuit. It's a compass pointing to neglected terrain, play, grief, truth, wonder, love. Recalibrate the compass and dopamine follows like a loyal dog. Keep ignoring it, and you'll chase chemical shadows until the batteries die. So yes, learn the neurology. Take the medicine if you must. But remember, diagrams describe, they do not deliver. Recovery begins when you ask the question microscopes can't answer. What is all this electricity for? Because once you glimpse that purpose, you'll notice a disturbing pattern. The entire culture around you is designed to sell counterfeit purpose at lightning speed. The moment you let your guard down, an algorithm whispers, "This notification is meaning. Click now." And that's why, The next leg of the journey drags us straight into the marketplace where emptiness is monetized and attention is the most expensive drug on earth. Picture the trickster from every old myth, Coyote, Loki, the masked jester, now wearing a hoodie made of code and glowing notifications. He's no longer lurking at the edge of the village. He's sitting in your pocket, studying the micro-pause of your thumb before it taps play. The moment your pulse flickers with boredom or loneliness, he slides a neon fix across the glass. New message, recommended for you. One-day sale ends in 3 hours. Make no mistake, these flashes aren't random, they're precision-engineered rituals. Where temples once rang with bells, phone screens now light up with red badges. Where elders once led dusk ceremonies, algorithmic drums beat 24/7, promising belonging in 10-second loops. Swipe down for communion, scroll up for absolution, tap twice for a hit of "You exist." Jung warned that when a society loses living symbols, counterfeit ones rush in. Our ancestors danced around fires to honor the mystery. We hunch over LEDs, chasing the same biochemical spark, but there's a catch the trickster never mentions. Every click that soothes the ache rents out a slice of your attention. Soon you're paying in hours you swore you didn't have, in sleep you can't afford to lose, in self-respect you didn't notice slipping away. Look at the modern marketplace. Energy drinks named Monster, slot machines themed after fairy, tales, dating apps that gamify intimacy with endless left-right spins. It's the collective shadow monetized, our unspoken cravings wrapped in glitter and sold back to us at scale. And because the exchange happens in public daylight, we forget it's a transaction at all. We call it keeping up, staying, informed, just unwinding, until our souls feel like overdrawn bank accounts. The cruel genius is how ordinary it all seems. No back alley handshake, no shady dealer, just a friendly buzz on your wrist saying, "You might like this." By the 10th buzz, you forget what you like. And by the 100th, you forget why you were restless in the first place. The void is still there, only now it's wearing sponsored colors. So the question shifts, can you live in a world built to rent your hunger without letting it own your hunger? Because until you answer that, every step toward recovery drags a tale of pop-ups promising shortcuts. And white-knuckling against an army of engineers is a losing game, which is why sheer willpower eventually cracks. To walk free, you'll need something deeper than resistance, an inner alliance that turns the shadow from saboteur into ally. That next move is called individuation, and it begins the moment you stop wrestling the river and learn to redirect its force. Picture yourself on a storm-tossed raft, clutching a rope that's fraying strand by strand. That rope is sheer willpower. Every never again, every emptied bottle hurled at midnight, every fitness tracker streak, one more desperate yank to keep the raft pointed north. And for a while it works. Friends applaud, apps shower you with digital confetti, the calendar stacks proud little check marks. Then a bad day hits, your boss snaps, the car won't start. That old ache in your chest wakes up, and the rope snaps with a single silken pop. You blink, stunned, as the raft swings back toward the very whirlpool you swore you'd outgrow. Shame piles on. I'm weak. I had it. What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong. The problem is that the hand gripping the rope is the same hand sawing it in half below the waterline. Jung called that inner Civil War psychic splitting. Part of you wants sobriety, another part hoards the substance like an oxygen tank. Iron discipline yanks one side into the light, while the other digs its nails deeper in the dark. The harder you pull, the tighter the knot. That stalemate is why New Year's resolutions crash by February, and why relapse feels like amnesia. Who was I kidding with all that new me talk? Individuation offers a different map. Instead of excising the craving, you decode it. You sit at the negotiating table with the shadow and ask, what do you really need? Sometimes the answer is blisteringly simple. Sleep, a cry no one hears, a song you never let yourself sing. Give the shadow its legitimate due, and the counterfeit demand loses bite. Take Maya, who white-knuckled a decade of party drug weekends. She didn't break free by locking herself in a monastery. She broke free by joining a drum circle. What she sought in MDMA wasn't chemicals. It was embodied joy, sweat, tribal bass-shaking ribs that had forgotten how to vibrate. The drug was evicted because the music moved in. Or Leo, a hedge fund strategist who cracked bourbon bottles like knuckles after every market crash. Therapy unearthed the truth. The bourbon wasn't calming fear, it was muting grief he never mourned after his brother's suicide. The day Leo wrote a furious, tear-soaked letter to that brother and read it aloud at the grave, the nightly bourbon suddenly tasted like formaldehyde. Ritual replaced ritual, sacred replaced synthetic. Individuation is not a one-time epiphany, it's a slow grafting of exiled limbs back onto the body. You journal dreams, track triggers, breathe through old memories until the room stops spinning. You practice tiny rebellions, saying no without an apology, laughing too loud, letting tears stain the shirt instead of the pillow. Each act stitches shadow to self until the seam disappears. Notice what does not happen. Perfection. Cravings still whisper, but now they sound like children tugging at your sleeve, not wolves howling at the door. You feed them real food, honest. Rest, fierce art, unarmored conversation, and they curl up satisfied. Willpower is still welcome. It's just no longer the lonely sheriff of a lawless town. Yet some thirsts are so ancient they demand a thunderclap, an encounter that blasts the ceiling off the psyche and floods the cellar with stars. That's where the doorway of awe swings, open, ushering seekers into experiences no bottle can imitate. Some cravings dissolve only when something larger storms the room and knocks the bottle clean out of its spotlight. That larger goes by many names: epiphany, revelation, the infinite, but its flavor is unmistakable. For a heartbeat, you're so wide awake, the air seems to ring. It can arrive without warning. A father watches his newborn draw a first breath and feels centuries pass through the tiny lungs. A solo hiker crests a ridge at dawn, and the valley below blooms like a living cathedral. A widow kneels at a grave and, in the hush between sobs, senses a presence too vast to fit inside language. Nothing is added to the bloodstream, yet every cell sparks like fireworks. Other times, the door is opened on purpose. Pilgrims sweat in cedar-smoked lodges, fasting until visions flicker behind their eyelids. Monks chant through moonless nights, until the chant falls away and only pure listening remains. Artists paint through sunrise, brush flinging colors they didn't know they carried. Some seekers turn to plant medicines, mushrooms, ayahuasca, iboga, ancient keys that can fling the psyche beyond its usual fence posts. Whatever the route, the result is similar. The small self unzips, and for a radiant instant you remember how enormous, how exquisitely alive reality can be. The throat that once begged for whiskey now gulps starlight. The fingers that jittered for a phone swipe rest open, stunned. Compare that to the chemical high, and the chemical feels like counterfeit perfume. Loud, cheap, fading fast. Yet here lies the paradox. Awe is a gift, but it isn't a cure-all. Touch the divine for a weekend and sprint back to ordinary life. And Monday morning can feel flatter than ever. The mind tries to recreate the lightning by any means, sometimes by doubling the dose that never really worked in the first place. That's how mountaintop rapture mutates into a new chase, a shinier loop of one more ceremony, one more vision, another excuse to skip the laundry of daily living. Jung's counsel was clear. The revelation must be harvested. If the stars sing to you at 2 a.m., carry their echo into breakfast dishes and tax forms. If a psilocybin night cracks your heart wide, let the daylight hours feel its pulse. Call the mother you haven't spoken to in years. Apologize without flinching. Paint the room the color you saw in the vision. Turn the thunderclap into a drumbeat that keeps ordinary time. Think of awe as lightning striking a dark field. For a second, the whole landscape shines. Broken fences, hidden rivers, seeds sprouting beneath mud. The flash doesn't mend the fence or channel the river. It just shows you where the work belongs. Integration is walking that field at sunrise with hammer, shovel, and seeds in your pocket, ready to labor for the harvest the flash revealed. Because when awe is welcomed into muscle memory, into chores, quarrels, bedtime stories, it ferments into something sturdier than euphoria. Call it rooted wonder. In that soil, cravings can't take deep hold. They've got no shadowy corner left to hide in, and this is the final turning. Learning to live from that rooted wonder day after day, until the part of you that once begged for escape now guards the gate of your own wholeness. The last door out isn't in the sky or the bottle. It's the quiet hinge that swings open inside your ribcage. Tonight, when the itch paces your ribs and every instinct screams numb it, pause and ask yourself, what is this craving really hungry for? Not the liquor or the scroll or the pill, but what soft corner of your spirit is starving. Name it aloud. I'm lonely, I'm furious, I'm terrified I'll never matter. That naming shines a spotlight into the cell where your true self has waited in darkness. Next, answer the call with a tiny act of honesty. Maybe you text a friend you've hurt and say, I miss you. Maybe you write in a journal until tears smudge the ink. Maybe you step outside and let the night air carry your breath. Whatever it is, let the act be simple and immediate. A single motion that says, I see you. Do this again tomorrow and the day after. Each small acknowledgement is a brick laid across the chasm you built to bury shame, fear, and grief. Over weeks, those bricks become a bridge. The exiled parts of you start walking back into the light. The anger you once drowned begins to roar its own healing song. The sorrow you medicated becomes a well you can draw from. Notice what changes. The craving still knocks, but now it sounds like an old friend, not a predator. You offer it a seat at the table instead of shoving it into a cabinet. In that new dynamic, the urge to escape loses its power, because escape was never the goal, reunion was. This is your rebirth, not into someone perfect, but into someone whole. The last door out of addiction isn't another ritual or another treatment. It's the quiet hinge inside your ribcage that opens when you remember who you always were. And once that door swings wide, every step forward carries the weight of a journey you're finally free to finish. Now stand at the mouth of the cave you once fled, the one where every craving echoed like a monster's roar. Here is where the final lesson waits. This journey was never about avoidance. It was about return. You have followed the faint glimmer of meaning through the desert of desire, descended into the cellar of exiled selves, witnessed flash floods of awe, and learned to rebuild from the broken stones. All that remains is to walk out carrying fire in your hands, not fear. Addiction leaves a map inked in desperation, but that same map, read aright, guides you home. The landmarks you feared, the shadow, the silence, the sudden thunderclap of wonder are signposts, each pointing toward a richer terrain. When you learn to read those signs, the compass needle steadies. You discover that every craving was a messenger bearing an invitation, not to destruction, but to wholeness. So go ahead, name the habit that haunted you, thank it for its warning, and step forward into the life it was never built to sustain. Let each small act of honesty, every tear, every confession, every breath taken in plain sight, become a brick in the bridge between who you were and who you're becoming. You do not walk this path once and arrive. You spiral ever upward, revisiting old wounds with new eyes until grace becomes your second nature. Your story does not end here. It unfolds with each choice you make beyond the bottle, the screen, the syringe. You are both the hero and the mythmaker, forging meaning from the wreckage. If this message landed in your bones, pass it on. Light a lantern for the soul still stumbling in darkness. Because the next thirst you quench will be someone else's first real taste of water. Like, subscribe, and share this journey. Let your own transformation become the legend someone needs to believe they can write their own.